The little boy was called to the head teacher's office. It wasn't the first time that he'd been there, but perhaps it would be his last. He threw himself down in the big chair and waited for the long lecture about his short temper and bad behavior. But this time the head teacher was speaking kindly to him. She said, "I'm really sorry, I've got some really bad news for you today. You're not going to be able to go home at the end of school. In fact, you're going to have to go now with this lady. She's called a social worker. She's going to take you to another family. They're called a foster family." "Well, I don't want to go with a foster family." "Well, I'm sorry, there's no choice. That's where you're going today." "Well, can I go and say goodbye to my mum and dad?" "No, not today." "Well, how about my sister?" "No, not today." "Well, how about the dog? Can I go pat the dog?" "No, not today." "Well, how about my stuff?" "Not today." That story is not unusual. Every 22 minutes in the UK, a child comes into the care system. Most of those children never go home again. In fact, 60% of them stay in care until they age out, normally around their 18th birthday. Most of the statistics about what happens to those children are pretty terrible. But maybe you're familiar with those. Maybe you've lost hope for what can happen to children in the care system. Or maybe like me, you think there's another way that things can go. Let me tell you a story about another couple of children. It happened not a million miles away from here in Oxford. The little boy and the little girl were taken away from their family because of an extreme domestic violence situation. They had to be separated for their safety. One was adopted into a well-to-do family. And the other, the boy, well, he was taken away to the back of beyond. The little girl, she was passionate about making a difference in the world and so entered into public service when she grew of age. Well, the little boy, he joined the military, as many care leavers do, because he wanted to find some structure and wanted to do something good in the world. This little boy grew up and became a hero. He didn't just save his platoon, he didn't just save his country, he didn't just save his world, he saved the whole galaxy. This took place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Luke and Leia Skywalker. Well, they're not alone in the film industry, are they? Think how many looked after children are there in our most precious films. Spider-Man was brought up by his auntie. Superman was adopted. James Bond was adopted. Paddington Bear was an unaccompanied refugee child in assisted housing. Harry Potter was fostered terribly by the Dursleys. And Batman, somehow he was brought up by his butler. Somehow our filmmakers, our novelists, our cartoonists, they've discovered a secret that I want to share with you today. They realize that children that have had maybe the most difficult start in life can actually develop the skills and the resilience in order to make a success of life. Filmmakers understand that someone's history does not determine their destiny. They understand that hospitality can change the world. And that's what I want to talk about today. The problem is that little boy who ended up on my doorstep, that 6-year-old, he was on my doorstep with just his swimming kit and his lunchbox. That little boy has the world of statistics against him. He's going to need all the help he can get if he's going to fight those statistics. Because science fiction says he can grow up and become a guardian of the galaxy. But social fact tells us he's more likely to end up in custody of our Her Majesty's government. Let me tell you some pretty scary statistics. 60% of children who enter care only leave when they age out, normally on their 18th birthday. Care leavers make up 1% of the population of the UK, but 25% of the homeless population of the UK. Care leavers also make up 50% of the male under 25 prison population. And in some areas it's 30%, but in other areas it's 70% of sex workers are young women that have aged out of care. Now, the care system is not working. Despite there being some amazing social workers and some fantastic foster parents, the care system is not working. The care system shouldn't be a hospice where children's futures and dreams go to die. The care system should be a hospital where children can get the healing and help that they need. But where are we going to find those hospitals? Well, I believe those hospitals are in every act of hospitality that you and I are able to offer these children, every door of opportunity we're able to offer them. I want to tell you 4 things about hospitality that I think can change the world. This is a picture of my grandfather. Now you're thinking, which one? Well, it's the guy on the right. He was a well-to-do Englishman. He went to India to run a tea plantation, and like so many, he fell in love with a beautiful young Indian woman. But unlike so many, he married her, and they raised 3 children together, 3 little girls. This is a picture not of a trophy killing, but of the fact that my grandfather was called in when a tiger went rogue and marauded through a village. And he was a crack shot, and so he took the tiger out with one shot. And when the war came, he brought his marksmanship skills to the military, signed up for the Indian Army. And he died in the desert of El Alamein, providing covering fire for his troops. He ended up getting the military cross for his bravery. But when he died, those 3 little girls and their mother were separated. You see, these mixed-race, half-caste children were unacceptable to the wider family. And so they were banished to 3 separate orphanages. But then in steps my great-grandmother. She heard about this plight from England, leaves her leafy suburb, and she heads to India to round these girls up and bring them home. She welcomed them home to England and gave them a safe place to be. My mother wanted to pass on that hospitality, so she did 2 things. One was she became a nurse. The other was she opened her home to anyone that was in need. Now, those were difficult days in the 60s and 70s in the United Kingdom. She got a lot of racial abuse. People used to throw bananas at her. They used to mock her, wondering whether she could use a knife or a fork. But she did a judo move on that hostility, and she instead welcomed people into our home all the time. And I think that's what inspired me and my wife to become foster parents. We'd seen the impact that hospitality had in breeding more hospitality, and we wanted to pass that on to kids in need. So hospitality breeds hospitality. But I think hospitality also breaks hostility. I remember one night, it was 11 o'clock at night. I'm living at home, I'm a teenager, and somehow the doorbell goes. And my mum, quick as lightning, she's the first to the door, and she opens it to reveal a huge man filling up the whole of the doorframe. And he's got a crazy story. He's just arrived into the United Kingdom, into a flight into Gatwick Airport. And he'd been chatting to this girl for the entire flight. And as he was going through customs, he realized he had something to declare. His undying love for the girl he'd been sat next to on the plane. But this is the dark ages. This is the last millennium. There's no Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram. He's got nothing, no mobile phones. All he's got is one clue. This girl was headed for Brighton. So he's going door to door to every one of Brighton's 120,000 homes until he can find this girl. Now, that's enough for me to slam the door. I've seen enough stranger danger movies to know this is a nightmare. But not my mum. She says, "Oh, you better come in then." Welcomes him, sits him down, makes him a nice hot mug of Indian tea, and here's the rest of his story. By that time, it's late, so she says, "Well, you better have a bed for the night." She converts our sofa into a bed and sets him up. That's great news for him, but bad news for me. My bedroom door is opposite the lounge. And so I take every single bit of furniture that I own and I build a barricade. And I'm under my duvet and I've got my little Swiss Army penknife for protection. I'm not thinking about mum and dad upstairs and my sister without the penknife or the barricade. But I am so scared. We wake up the next morning, I'm still alive, yes. All our stuff is still there. But I learnt a lesson. Hospitality can break hostility. I'd love to believe that man, we never heard from him again. He found the girl of his dreams, and there's an English-German couple living somewhere happily ever after. And when they tell the story of how they first met, they tell the story of a little Indian woman who believed in love. Hospitality can break hostility. Hostility says you are not welcome, you're not my problem. Hospitality says my home can be a hospital to you if you need it. Hospitality bequeaths hope. Our family got a call at 4:45 on a Friday afternoon. That's a really dangerous time to answer the phone if you're a foster carer, because the social services office is closing in 15 minutes' time. And they're phoning you because they're desperate to find a home for a child. They say, Krish, we know you've already got a placement with you, but could you take another one? We say, okay, tell us something about him. They said, well, we can't tell you much. All we can tell you is he's a biter. That is not what you want to hear. My brain is in a battle now. Part of me says I need to help. The other part says, well, what does he bite? Does he bite things or people? If he bites people, where's he been? What's he been exposed to? And then the good part of my brain kicks in. And it says biter. That is an inadequate description of a human person, isn't it? Because you and I, we're more than the worst thing that we've ever done, or the worst thing that's ever been done to us. A friend of mine, he's a Christian, he uses this illustration. He says, look, imagine you go to the cash machine and you get two £20 notes out. One is pristine, it's just been minted. The other is dirty and crumpled and has been written on. Which one is worth more? My mate uses that as an illustration to talk about God's love for humanity. But I don't think you have to be a Christian to understand that every single human being is worthy of dignity, respect, and compassion. And so we had this little boy in our lives, and he bit a lot of stuff. Pizza, sausages, you name it. And when he started to speak, he only bit because he was so frustrated he couldn't communicate well. When he started to speak, he never stopped. I believe that little boy is now in year 4 at school, and I've got a bet on him that he's going to be Britain's first black prime minister. He's such a jewel, such a gem of a child. Our culture really values where people come from, doesn't it? If you come from a good background, doors get opened for you all the time. You make it into the best schools and the most elite universities, and they're hugely overrepresented in our government. What would happen if we flipped it around? That we recognize that a child with care experience has more to offer. What about if we could open doors of opportunity for them into our workplaces, into our elite universities, into government? Think of how a child who has experienced the care system, think about what kind of leader they would make. Think about a society that genuinely works for everybody because the person leading the change has experienced the worst and most difficult parts of society. Hospitality builds heroes. I don't think foster carers are heroes. I don't think it takes superpowers to set an extra dinner place around the kitchen table. I don't think it takes superpowers to read a bedtime story to a child that's had a nightmare trauma in their lives. I don't think it takes superpowers to play an extra game of Mario Kart with a little one that's just arrived. But these children, they're the superheroes. They're the ones that have experienced terrible things and yet still are living on. That 6-year-old that was there in front of the head teacher, he came to live with us. And when he came to live, he still went to the same school, and he had a taxi driver that used to drive him every day back and forth to school. That taxi driver came to see us a year after this little boy had left. And they said, I was going through a nightmare time. My relationship was falling apart. I only saw my own children at the weekends. The only thing that kept me going was that little 6-year-old boy asking me how I was each morning. He changed my life. These children are treasures and superheroes and can make a difference in our lives. I started a charity with a mate of mine, and I get to meet incredible people. I've met foster parents that decided to turn their home into a refugee assessment centre so that unaccompanied refugee teenagers didn't get looked after in an institution but got looked after in a home. I've met people that have adopted a sibling group of 4 so that brothers and sisters don't need to be separated but can be kept together. I've met Romanian families that are trying to close down orphanages in Romania, reunite the children with their parents, or adopt them into loving homes forever. I believe hospitality can change the world. I believe it can change the world of these children. I believe we can change those statistics. I think we can make a huge impact on homelessness, on drug addiction, on sexual exploitation. I believe that hospitality can change your life and my life. I know of no more beautiful sound than that of laughing children, and I know no greater joy than caring for a child and watching them flourish. I believe hospitality can change the world that we live in. I think there are huge knock-on effects on all the major social problems that we face right now. I think hospitality is one of the most wonderful gifts we can give. And I believe it can start when we put down our prejudice, we put away our fears, and instead we open our hearts, our homes, our borders, and our imaginations, and we give the children the love they need in order that they might make a success of their lives. I believe hospitality can change the world. Are you with me?